Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the various races of Total War Warhammer 3, what makes them really good and what is really bad about every single race in the game, the strengths and weaknesses, starting with the Beastmen. One of the chief benefits of playing the Beastmen is that you have a good amount of campaign mobility, especially as Tarks the Brass Bull, but inherently Beastmen do get a good amount of mobility around the campaign map, be it movement range after battles or raising settlements, or the ability of just moving around territory on the campaign map in a way few other races can. And even races that do have a good amount of movement range, think of Ogres, for instance, or Khorne, who has a huge amount of campaign movement range per turn, even those races don't necessarily have the same advantages that Beastmen have in terms of ability. Beastmen can be really stealthy, or they can be really fast. They can traverse across virtually all terrain in the campaign map, and they're very difficult to defeat as a race, because another advantage that Beastmen do have are their hurt zones. Beyond the various effects that they can give in an area on the campaign map, hurt zones have pretty solid garrisons and can be very tricky to assault, especially when you're dealing with Beastmen who might be laying in ambush for you. So that is one of their chief strengths as a race, as well as the ability of scaling up in a very substantial fashion much later on in the campaign. The biggest flaw of the Beastmen is the fact that they're using one resource for virtually everything. You want to increase Lord rank? Dread. You want to get more armies? Dread. You want to get better armies or horde armies? Dread. You want to improve your herd zones? Dread. Basically, Dread is used for everything, and this creates a significant issue in terms of campaign pacing, because early on in the campaign, you're going to be pushed towards getting things like Legendary Lords, increasing hero capacity, improving your armies, as opposed to getting unit capacity. So you end up with kind of samey armies with the Beastmen, where you're just spamming a bunch of crappy Ungor Raiders, because it is the most sensible strategy in a campaign as the Beastmen. So it can start feeling like an intern button simulator at times, where you're just waiting for stuff to happen, finding a certain number of battles. You can speed the process up, but it is certainly a process that is going to take a good amount of time. Another chief issue is the fact that only Tarax has unique campaign mechanics of the Beastmen Legendary Lords, and the other Beastmen Lords fall far short in comparison to him. Moving on to Bretonnia, the Knights of France in Total War Warhammer. Well, like France, they're not especially great. Suffice to say, you look at Bretonnia as an area of the campaign map, one of their chief issues is that Bretonnia is not particularly well designed as an area of the campaign map. Then, you're also looking at Bretonnia, where you might as well have no infantry units, no range units. Artillery, okay, gets the job done, but it's really an all-cavalry race. You do have some of the best cavalry in the game, though not necessarily because your ground-based cavalry is that great. It is rather the fact that your flying cavalry is freaking phenomenal. Not only do they have a good amount of combat damage and also flexibility on the battlefield, but due to the fact that they are flying units, that gives you a certain edge in battle, especially compared to other cavalry units, or all kinds of units. Enemy has range, throw flying cav at them. Enemy has artillery, throw flying cav at them. Enemy has heroes that are magic users, throw cav at them. It does work far more often than not. But what limits Bretonnia significantly is their area of the campaign map, the lackluster Legendary Lords that we do have. Sure, Lewin is a monster in combat. On the campaign side of things, he's not really that great. You end up in a situation where opponents flat out is the best Legendary Lord to actually play a campaign as. Because two of these are stuck in Bretonnia, one is stuck in the jungle, so you're left with the girl that's stuck in the desert. I suppose Joan of Arc being the best French Legendary Lord makes perfect sense given France's historical context. But still, not really a great situation that Bretonnia does have to deal with. Also, it's really tedious having to manage all the vows on lords and heroes. Just overall, not a great situation over there. Bretonnia has more weaknesses than strengths in a campaign, but they are really strong in terms of their cavalry potential. Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves may end up having some of the most powerful armies in the entire campaign. They do have a fairly good diverse roster. They have melee units, range units, cav units. Not necessarily the best anti-cav units, but they do have pretty powerful cav, even if it is slower. Their flying units, not necessarily the best in the game, but they're pretty strong single entity units. Their artillery is freaking ridiculous. So that is one of the things that Chaos Dwarves do have going for them, one of their chief strengths. On top of that, all the Legendary Lords individually, as Lords in terms of Lord effects, special skill lines, are fairly ridiculous. Their special magic is also quite crazy, especially if you're playing Drafts of the Ashen. The critical issue that cast Dwarves do have has to do with the way their economy is set up. Simply put, cast Dwarves can be really strong, but it just takes you a very long time to get to that point, and given current campaign pacing in Warhammer 3, by the time you do get there, your campaign is pretty much over. And it ends up falling into the trap of becoming too powerful, and all those things ending up stacking together, and you just dominate the campaign map to the point that it's not an especially fun experience dealing with that. Daniel, nothing needs to be said. Garbage is garbage, suffice to say. Dark Elves, one of the strongest hyper-aggressive races in the game with a very strong focus on diplomacy, as well as a good amount of looting and sacking income from settlements, as well as having instant construction. Basically, the way the Dark Elf economy and campaign pacing works is actually substantially better than what the Cast Dwarves have, and maybe how the Cast Dwarves should actually be. They have a huge amount of hero capacity, a bunch of really good early game units that are far outclassing anything else. They have horde armies with significant army benefits in a way that the Vampire Coast weeps with envy, and they get shit done. If there is any substantial weakness with the Dark Elves, any substantial problem with the Dark Elves, it is this. The Legendary Lords themselves are not really that great. I mean, they're powerful, they get the job done undeniably so, but their campaigns kind of feel samey. Like, you've played one Dark Elf campaign, you kind of feel like you've played them all to a degree or another. It is always that hyper early aggression situation, and there's no unique campaign mechanics to really latch onto. And unless you're talking about Malice Darkblade, and let's just say it's not really the most fun campaign in the world to deal with. Sure, Lokir gets more Black Arcs than anyone else, but that's not really a unique campaign mechanic. That's more of a unique faction benefit that he does have. So it is that lack of individuality. It's also the issue that Dark Elves do have a problem with their late game roster, because it's frankly not really that great or interesting to you. Sure, Black Arcs, Dread Spears, Dark Shards get the job done, but that's pretty much what you're going to recruit for your entire campaign. Dwarves, a phenomenal race, and one where Creative Assembly really nailed it with regards to their racial rework. You have some of the best Legendary Lords in the entire game, and some of the most fun Legendary Lords in the entire game, especially Malachi McCason, who feels like the peak campaign experience in Total War Warhammer 3. You also have a race where you're not just playing one campaign in a small little corner of the campaign map, but you're playing an entire race with the Legendary Grudges, Confederation of Legendary Lords. It's all freaking phenomenal. Your artillery, range capability, and flying unit capability is almost second to none. You might not have the melee flying units of Bretonnia, but you have range flying units, which, quite frankly, break the game in a lot of ways. If there is any specific issue with the Dwarves, is this. Beyond any inherent weaknesses they might have, like lacking fast-moving ground-based units, so cavalry, chargers, all that. But the issue that Dwarves do have is the fact that their individual Legendary Lords, again, are lacking in terms of unique campaign mechanics. I mean, Forik kind of has it, but it's not really great. Malachi is the only one that's unique compared to the others. So can end up feeling a bit samey in a campaign. And some are just flat out better than others simply because of the climate situation suiting dwarf campaigns. Like basically, Malachi, Grumbrindle, and surprisingly Ungrim are going to be much better than the alternatives. Also, Belagard ends up suffering quite a bit because of his faction design. Forgrim is okay, but not necessarily the most special dwarf in a campaign. But overall, dwarves are a great race with far more strengths than weaknesses and can have really fun campaigns. But it can also feel like you're playing the same campaign over and over and over again. A lack of unique campaign mechanics. But they do have scalability in a way that Dark Elves don't have. The Empire. A race that isn't especially great at any one area, but has just a little bit of everything. Range units, cavalry units, artillery, infantry, heroes, casualty replenishment, you name it, the Empire probably has it. The only area where the Empire is lacking is regards to flying units, but on the ground, the Empire is really strong, really versatile, and capable of dealing with virtually every situation that they come across. The three Legendary Lords of the Empire that are worth playing, be it Karl Franz, Gelt, and Elspeth, are also very unique Legendary Lords with their own unique campaign mechanics, playstyles, and really interesting campaigns. I would say Karl Franz does stand head and shoulders above all the others, but that's not to say that Gelt or Elspeth are broken. The problem of the Empire, well, two major issues. One, their infantry line is pretty lacking, if I'm being honest with you. Like, if you look at the entire Empire infantry line over here, the only unit that's really solid are greatswords. Everything else, like, yes, you can get some Electric Count State Troopers like Eldred's Guard. Like, really, if all Imperial infantry units were more like Eldred's Guards than swordsmen, that would be a much better situation for the Empire to deal with. So the Empire is lacking in terms of infantry capability. They do have range capability, artillery capability, tank capability, but they do have issues. But the chief issue of the Empire is how worthless Marcus Wolfhard and Volkmar the Grim are to play in the campaign. Marcus because he's just really a bad Legendary Lord, that the playstyle is significantly outdated ever since Thrones Decay, and Volkmar because he has to deal with the Books of Nagash system as his inherent campaign benefit in his campaign life. Yeah, that is a problem. Grand Cathay. Again, a very versatile race. Like, they have a bit of everything, single entities, artillery, flying artillery units. They're actually capable of doing quite well in the air as well, because they have a number of units in that respect. Their Legendary Lords are all freaking dragons that are pretty powerful in combat. They also have caravans, various other benefits. However, while they do have that kind of versatility, and Cathay is one of the best campaign areas in the game to have that short campaign experience, the problem with Cathay is the fact that you play a short campaign, you dominate Cathay early on, and then it's kind of over. You have the scalability in theory, but not necessarily in practice, because the thing that hurts Cathay quite a lot is their lack of casualty replenishment and the various annoyances that you have to deal with. It's basically a lot of fluff, managing harmony, having to find manual battles just because you don't have casualty replenishment. The Legendary Lords basically playing the same campaign over and over again. Like, I can say how Dark Elves, Dwarves are samey, but really, Cathay, it's basically not free campaigns, but the same campaign in one. Because in every campaign, you will be dealing with the same territory, with the same enemies, over and over and over again. Even in Yanbo's case, you still want to focus on that Cathay and stuff. And it's not like dealing with the jungle is a much better dynamic in his campaign. What really hurts Cathay is that lack of long-term benefits in playing their campaign, because climate really does end up hurting Cathay quite a bit. Also, they just feel like a slower race than others. They have very strong early game, but getting to higher tiers is annoying, though that's where all the fun stuff is. Greenskins, the Green Tide, not necessarily the best in terms of individual units, though surprisingly between the scrap upgrades and the research streak, they can actually reach to a level where they either equal or surpass many other races in the game. Their Legendary Lords can also feel very unique. Grimgor, Gorbad, Warzak, Skarsnik, even Azag and Grom, if you want to go with that. They do have their very different campaigns with different focuses in those campaigns, which makes them really good. What is the issue of the Greenskins? Well, it's kind of hard to pinpoint any specific thing, really. They have a diverse roster. They might be lacking in flying units, but they're pretty solid on ground. They have a good economy. They have a scalable economy. They have a good amount of heroes. There's a lot of things to like about the Greenskins. If there is any specific issue, is the fact that, well, Grom's campaign is not especially great. Gorbad's unique campaign mechanic is not phenomenal. That leaves you with Skarsnik having the only unique campaign mechanic that's worth a damn. Sure, you can always play Grimgor and be Grimgor, which is hilariously fun, but it is kind of that lack of uniqueness of their Legendary Lords. Or if there is uniqueness with Grom and Gorbad, it's not really that freaking phenomenal. I wouldn't necessarily consider Warzak unique. Sure, he has those Savage Orc benefits, absolutely, but it's not really enough in a campaign from my point of view. But it's really hard to criticize the Greenskins for much of anything. Well, if there is one thing, is that could feel a lot better, like it's just a meter you fill up and then you spend 20 turns doing the thing and then starting it all over, though it's not necessarily even worth it. That might be an absolute issue in their campaigns. Also, I would dare say that probably the biggest issue that Greenskins do have is that for such an incredibly, insanely powerful race, their auto-resolve does leave a lot to be desired, which means that if you're playing Greenskin campaign, you're probably going to end up having to fight more battles than you should, which can be a significant issue. High Elves. Oof, the High Elves. Well, on one hand, the High Elves do have some of the strongest early game armies in the game, with Spearmen and Archers being able to be used throughout the entire course of the campaign, and on top of that, High Elves do have a fairly diverse cast of legendary lords, even if Teclis might as well not exist. But if you look at Tyrion, Alariel, Elfarion, Alifanar, and Emmerich, they all have their own unique campaign mechanics. High Elves also have a huge amount of scalability in terms of their economy, heroes, units, in a campaign. But they're fairly broken in the way they work. Their early game is glacially slow. They are a race that builds up, so the highest level of challenge you're going to have early on when you have less unit variety, because that is one of the significant weaknesses of the Higher Elves. And by the time you do get to a point of having that kind of unit variety, you are so dominant you don't really care. It's like adding more power to power. And also, yeah, Teclis is just pretty awful. Khorne, phenomenal race, melee focused, really dynamic on the campaign map, has the ability of just going around the entire campaign map, regardless of the legendary lord you're playing as, because all the Khorne legendary lords have cults, so you end up having great amount of flexibility. Hilariously, Khorne is also a master of diplomacy. If you want to play a race where you're just vassalizing other factions and getting them to do their your bidding through diplomacy, Khorne is a really good choice. Sure, it might only work with chaos factions, but it's still a really solid choice. Also, Arbol has one of the most fun, dynamic campaigns in terms of an objective-based campaigns in the game, as well as with the strong mortal focus. If there are any significant issues with Khorne, it has to do with the fact that Skulltaker's campaign is a significant letdown. It's not even Skulltaker's issue, it's really Lustria's issue. And also, they did go for this differentiation between mortal and demonic elements that didn't quite work out, because mortal elements and mortal units are substantially better than demonic units, at least when it counts in a campaign. But overall, a great race and a very unique race that gets the job done. Kislev, the Defenders of the Motherland. Another race with a great variety of in terms of their unit roster, powerful magic, powerful units. They are lacking in terms of flying units and artillery, but they're so damn strong on ground that you might not care about it. Besides, you can always recruit those kind of things from allies. You also have some really powerful legendary lords with Astanka and Boris Ursus. Kislev used to be a really horrible race. The rework has benefited them quite a bit. And you can go for various playstyles in a campaign and a battle that do work for them. If there is any significant issue, and there is that Castalta and Catherine just don't feel like they're worth playing. Catherine in particular is a pathetic legendary lord that doesn't even feel that special of a caster. Her magic skull is the worst choice they could have gone for as a Kislev legendary lore. Like, Catherine the lore should be one of the most powerful casters in the lore, especially for a human, but she ends up playing second fiddle even for a generic Ice Mage, Ice Witch, or Frost Maiden hero. Lizardmen. Dinosaurs riding dinosaurs. Awesome, right? Powerful magic, nuclear weapons with heroes with Lord Croak. It's all really great, but unfortunately, Lizardmen don't really have any particular strengths, unfortunately. Like, they do have a really great campaign with Axial, which is probably one of the best strengths that they do have in a campaign, with all that dynamic gameplay around the campaign map, teleportation objectives. That's great. But the Lizardmen are a really broken race. Their economy doesn't work, their settlement construction doesn't work, their hero capacity, their early game units. A lot of things don't work about the Lizardmen. What's worse is that they might have a lot of content and legendary lords, but a lot of it does end up feeling fluff. Like Mazamudi is flat, I don't know, worth playing. Krokar is just Mr. Generic 101. Tic-Tac-Toe is garbage, and so on and so forth. Then you get to Norsca, the Monkey Kings of the North. Yeah, there's nothing else to be said about Norsca. Horrible unit roster early on, limited economy. The one thing I can say that works for Norsca is, well, nothing. I'm sorry, there's almost nothing that works for Norsca. There's better races in terms of a monster roster, there's better races in terms of campaign mechanics, there's better races that are better balanced with unique campaign mechanics. So, you know, I know this is a video about strengths and weaknesses, but there's almost nothing I can say that's great about Norsca, except that they kind of have a bit of a safe starting position. That's it. Don't play Norsca. Nurgle. Masters of Plague and Heavy Infantry. They have some of the best infantry in the entire game, and some really crazy, powerful faction effects available to them. Tamerkan is also a particularly great Legendary Lord with all the unique heroes that he does have in his campaign, and the kind of units that you can get and effects you can get from those heroes. So that is a phenomenal experience. You can also get a huge amount of heroes in a Nurgle campaign in general. The problem with Nurgle is pacing. A lot of things take too slow. It is annoying that you're using one resource for the same thing over and over again. Using infections for both plagues and buildings. Something that Creative Assembly should have handled better, so Nurgle does not end up working in the best possible way. Though I would say the biggest problem that Nurgle has is that every single Nurgle campaign has the same issue. Nurgle is the kind of race that gets affected by climate penalties far more so than others. But every single Nurgle campaign has to deal with one unpleasant climate, mountain. And they have a lot of climates that are viable for them, but they chose to put all the Nurgle campaigns next to mountains and have them deal on mountains in every single situation. Thank you, Creative Assembly. Then we get into Ogres. Really fun race dynamic. Has a lot of flavor to it. Really powerful units. Makes a playstyle of focusing on just a handful of settlements work very well in their campaigns. You can either build a regular economy and regular settlements, so you will want at least one camp for your recruitment, or you can focus purely on the camps. It does work. Also, another thing to be said about Ogres is that they do have very different campaigns with each of their Legendary Lords. So Greases, Scrag, and Goldfang Maneater do play differently from one another. And that is a kind of situation that you almost never see. And unlike some other races which might have that variety on paper, in Ogre case, it's actually worth it to play every single one of them. There's no clear winner in the Ogres. Like, Maneater has that more dynamic campaign movement range around the campaign map. Scrag has really powerful magic and meat benefits. And Greases is the god of gold. So Ogres do work. If there is any inherent weakness with the Ogres is that, and this sounds really minor and insignificant, is that their unit recruitment might be a bit slow because a lot of their units may take multiple turns to recruit. That's it. I'm quite serious. Ogres are awesome. Go play them. Skaven, the Ratmen of the Warhammer Fantasy universe. A great deal of Legendary Lord variety, really powerful armies, and a lot of fun to be had. They have scalability. They can use resources in order to get their settlements to a high level very quickly, which makes their campaigns inherently more fun to actually play, because you always have that kind of flexibility. Oh, do I want to go to tier 5 in a couple of turns of the campaign, or do I want to take it slow? You do have that choice as Skaven. And, well, let's just say having nuclear weapons is always a hilarious thing. If there is any specific issue with the Skaven, is that Ikekla and Frat, who have the most unique campaign mechanics of the Skaven Legendary Lords, they don't have the best starting positions. Also, Skaven are lacking in terms of an infantry roster, because clan rats, Game of Slaves, and Storm Vermin are generally not worth it. Slaanesh, well, it's under construction right now, so come back in a couple of months and then we can talk about how Slaanesh has panned out for Creative Assembly after their rework and their DLC. Until that point, Slaanesh is not really worth talking about. Tomb Kings, the undead Egyptians of Warhammer Fantasy. Really powerful race in quite a few ways. Their units are free to recruit, free to maintain. Their armies are completely disposable, except their heroes, because, well, their lords are immortal. Their units can be easily replaced, so you're only losing experience. So once you get going with the Tomb Kings, you are nigh on unstoppable. That is really good. And they have a good selection of units, be it constructs, artillery, infantry. All really solid, and good heroes. The problem with the Tomb Kings is getting access to all of that. So that is the one thing that does hurt them quite a bit. The pacing of their campaigns. Their limitations in terms of both unit capacity and army capacity does end up hurting them quite a bit with respect to their campaigns. So once you do get going, you are nigh on unstoppable, but it does take that process to get there, and it kind of creates a bad situation in a campaign because you're struggling in that early game, and it's not especially fun, but once you do overcome that, you basically have won the campaign, and there's nothing that can stop you. Siege, not worth talking about. Sorry, Creative Assembly didn't do a great job with Siege. Changeling was one of the worst campaigns in the game, and Kairos, well, better, Still not really a great campaign at the moment. The Vampire Coast, really powerful lords individually. Powerful magic, powerful combat ability with their individual lords, powerful heroes as well. Absolutely with the Vampire Coast, but it's a very outdated race. The Vampire Coast created a lot of things or used already existing ideas and implemented them very well at the time in Warhammer 2. Since then, they have been far outclassed by many other races that have taken the same mechanics and improved them further, leaving the Vampire Coast in the dust. And as someone put it, having a naval-focused race in a game that doesn't have naval warfare is not an especially great dynamic. Vampire Counts, the real vampires of the Total War Warhammer fantasy universe. You have Vlad Dracula over here and Isabella. Both very powerful lords. You have Kemler, the original necromancer. Original in the sense that he was the first, or one of the first characters created for Warhammer Fantasy. Some really powerful combat ability, some really powerful magic, lords, heroes, you name it. The Vampire Counts do have it. Also, one of the greatest things about the Vampire Counts is their ability of recruiting high-end units on the fly on the field after fighting battles. So fight really difficult battles and get yourself an in-game army as a result of that. That is freaking awesome. And I wish more races used that. Very strong. If there is a weakness is that, well, they haven't gotten a DLC in ages and they only got one DLC in their entire history. Sure, they got some updates with the Vampire Coast. I think Vampire Counts ended up being better than the Coast in the long term. But they do certainly feel limited, and quite a few of their campaigns were rather Gorse and Manfred just don't really feel like worth playing. So yeah, they could use some love, but surprisingly, they're one of the best races in the game for one that has gotten so little attention from Creative Assembly. They've benefited from various campaign redesigns or system redesigns in the game, be it the way the corruption works, vassal systems work, as well as various other things. Warriors of Chaos, the bringer of the end times. A huge amount of unit variety, as well as the best unit system in the game in terms of being able to upgrade your individual units to higher levels, making you more attached to the armies that you build in their campaigns. Huge variety, powerful lords, powerful heroes, powerful legendary lords, and unique campaign mechanics. Festus has the best plague system in the entire game. Bellicor is about having a dynamic campaign with teleportation around there. Archeon is about vassalizing the crap out of everyone because his faction effects. If there is a significant weakness in the Warriors of Chaos, is that they're so good that they literally break the game. It is almost impossible to lose a campaign in the Warriors of Chaos, and while there is obviously a good amount of variety between the legendary lords, the reality is Bellicor and to a lesser extent Archeon are just flat out the best legendary lords to play, far above all the others. Because of unit variety, confederation of other legendary lords, it just ends up working far better for them than the others. That is the weakness, but it's basically a case of like, these guys are too good for the way the game is currently being played, and it is felt. If you want to talk about an overpowered race, that is the Warriors of Chaos. Wood Elves, the other overpowered race, including Orion, who basically can have infinite armies for free upkeep on the campaign. That is ridiculous. Insanely powerful range, pretty good infantry, all things considered. Pretty good monstrous infantry, good heroes, good lords, good legendary lords. Variety of playstyles in the campaign, from the Treekin wallbreaker nonsense of Durfoot to the flying cruise missiles of the Sisters of Twilight, or the malevolent Treekin of Draika. Sure, Orion doesn't work out very well because he's got the cavalry focus for a race that doesn't care too much about cavalry, even though they have a good amount of cavalry available, or they have some cavalry available to them. But still, a good amount of variety between how the legendary lords feel, but the problem is the Wood Elves, also like the Warriors of Chaos, are just kind of breaking the game and just making the campaigns completely trivial, so it ends up being a case of playing an intern button simulator in all of their campaigns. But certainly the design fits them very well. Their units are powerful, but it is a combination of like them being too powerful as well as limitations that cause you to waste time in your campaign, like having to wait turns for things to be constructed and trees to be healed and events to happen. And that is the case with the races of Total War Warhammer 3. Let me know what you guys think. Christine signing out. Stay tuned for more.